Board of County Commission. Welcome to the February 15th, 2023 meeting of the Thurston County Planning Commission. The Thurston County Planning Commission is a citizens advisory committee to the Board of County Commissioners on land use planning matters such as the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance amendments. Planning Commission actions are in the form of recommendation to the county commissioners, who are the final decision makers. All Planning Commission meetings are open to the public. Citizens are welcome to observe all Planning Commission briefings and work sessions. We welcome public comment on those topics for which a public hearing has not been held. My name is Eric Casino, I'm Commission's chair and reside in District 2. We'll start our introductions of the other planning commissioners here in the boardroom and then move to our online commissioners. We'll start with you, Commissioner Carmen.
Doug Carmen, District 2.
Joel Hanson, District 3.
Jim Simmons, District 3.
Derek Day, District 1.
Barry Halverson, District 2.
Helen Wheatley, District 1.
Scott Nelson, District 3.
Commissioner Pestinger.
Kevin Pestinger, District 1.
Great, thank you very much. I hope everybody's had a chance to look over our agenda. It has been amended to fit our work plan for item 7.5, the Thurston 2045 update. Having said that, I would entertain a motion on our amended agenda.
So moved. Second.
Been moved in a second to accept our amended agenda. Call for the vote.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Commissioner Halverson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Carmen,
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson,
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons,
Aye.
Commissioner Wheatley, Commissioner Pessinger,
Aye.
Casino.
Aye. Our agenda has been accepted. All right. Item number 2. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look over our meeting minutes of February 1st, 2023, and as such, I would entertain a motion. Or do you have some?
I have an amendment, but I'm not sure what I want it to say. On page 3, lines 37 through 39. I'm not sure if that captures what I remember. I'm reading commissioners voice their concerns about the comp plan update and a perceived oversight by the planning commission not being involved in scoping. My recollection was that staff said that was intentional, so it wasn't an oversight of any kind. And then they said that it was a standard practice, but in our discussion, I think we identified several cases in jurisdictions where it happens otherwise. And I think it was brought up that recommendation from Commerce is that the planning commission does be involved in the process. So I don't know if standard practice could be an accurate reflection of the situation either.
No, that's fair. Does anybody else on the commission have concerns with these minutes as they're written, and should we amend them? And if so, do you have suggestions?
I share the same concern that Commissioner Hanson mentioned.
And do you have any suggestions on how to amend them?
The first one, I would say that, well, commissioners voiced some concerns about the comp plan update and the fact that the planning commission was not being involved in the scoping. I would say that's just that kind of takes any question out of it.
Okay, so
Let's strike the next sentence, staff.
Yeah.
and then strike.
Well,
staff.
but I think in Thurston County, that is standard practice.
Right.
That's the way it's been done. So that's to me, that's a true statement.
Could we add in Thurston County? And then I'd like to provide more clarity about the discussion beyond that, because I think it was, my recollection is pointed out it's not a standard practice for other jurisdictions.
You don't think that's covered by a discussion ensued?
I mean, technically it is, but it doesn't really.
Well, I mean, since the final outcome of it was we did generate a recommendation that we sent off to the Board of County Commissioners. We got done what we wanted to get done, and by having mildly vague
I'm okay with,
minutes,
okay, I'm okay with the, I mean, I guess I would,
we could still get the perceived oversight for fact of the and the fact of the planning commission not being involved in scoping.
Yeah, that's the biggest offender to me. The perceived oversight part. Because it wasn't an oversight, it's intentional,
No, that's fair.
but I think, at least 6 of us wanted to make clear that we didn't think that was appropriate.
Yeah,
So that should be in there as, I mean, maybe it should say staff confirm that is not the standard practice in Thurston County.
In Thurston County.
And then commissioners, what?
Well, I think the motion captures what the commissioners not.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm good with that.
okay, so if we just change line 37 to commissioners then voice their concerns about the comp plan update and the fact of the planning commission not being involved in the scoping, staff confirm that it is not the standard practice in Thurston County.
Yeah. I'm good
Okay,
with that.
so with that, we'd entertain a motion on the amended minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded by Commissioner Simmons. Call for the vote.
Aye.
Commissioner Collinson.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Carmen.
Abstain, wasn't here.
Commissioner Nelson.
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons.
Aye.
Commissioner Wheaton. Aye. Commissioner Passenger.
Aye. Meetings have been accepted as amended. All right. We're gonna move on to the public communications portions of our meeting, and I believe that we do not have anybody in the boardroom today, so we're gonna move to our online guests, and we are gonna have 3 minutes, and I think that Phyllis is the only one on, and Phyllis knows the rules pretty good, so we'll be happy to hear from you. Phyllis, you're up. You're muted, Phyllis.
Okay.
Here you are, we hear you.
Oh, good, good. Thank you. Well, I've spoken to you before many times, and I want to thank all of you for your service and the important work that you do. This is not, my comments tonight are not about a specific project or anything. It's more about the meetings themselves and the Zoom procedures or webinar procedures. And last fall, I believe it was, I had conversation with Josh Cummings about some suggestions that some of us in the public wanted to have happen. And he said that the Zoom procedures were really, parameters were up to the Planning Commission. So I know one of the things we asked about was when we were speaking that our video was shown, and I believe that does happen now. But another thing that we asked about is that we could see who else was on virtually, and that you all could see who all was on virtually, or at least a number. And so that's what I'm asking for tonight. Where we are on that, and is it possible to have a list of participants that are in the room virtually, and for you all to know who all is on virtually.
Is that
And
it,
that's-
Phyllis? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else online that would like to address the planning commission? Raise your hand if you'd like to address the planning commission. No, don't demote her anymore. Okay, not seeing anybody else wanting to address the planning commission, we'll move on to item number 4, a new business work session, number 1 on open space with Marissa Wishing.
Commissioners. I'm Marissa Westman, Associate Planner with Thurston County Community Planning, and I'm here this evening to discuss the Clements Open Space application and to ask you to set a public hearing for March 15, 2023. The open space program is guided by the Open Space Taxation Act, which was enacted by the Washington State Legislature in 1971 under RCW Chapter 8434. This act requires county governments to conserve open space lands, and tax reductions are granted if qualifying properties are maintained in a rural, undeveloped state. In accordance with state law, all properties shall be valued at 100% of their true and fair value unless exempted by law, and the Open Space Taxation Act authorizes such an exemption. Applicants must meet the criteria in RCW 8434 and in the Thurston County Open Space Tax Program guidelines in order to be eligible. And if the criteria is met, then tax reductions are granted due to a change from highest and best use to current use, with the public benefit rating system score determining the percent reduction. In a review, the public benefit rating system is basically a point system, which is based on the different priority resource categories in open space, and applicants must score at least 3 points in order to qualify. It's the board determines eligibility of applicants in the program based on application materials submitted and the rating system. However, the actual tax reduction process is completed by the county assessor's office, and it's the assessor's office who ultimately determines the percent reduction or what the reduction will be. Supporting documents such as a land conservation plan must be submitted with application materials, basically in order to verify the resource they're applying for is present on the property. Of particular relevance for this evening's discussion, properties which were formerly enrolled in the assessor's farm and agricultural lands classification, but which no longer qualify, are generally eligible for open space under the farm and agricultural conservation land category. For the 2023 process, we currently have one application in review. This is for the Clements property for enrollment under the farm and agricultural conservation land resource category with no public access. Clark and Joan Clements wish to enroll 4 of their 5 acres in open space, subtracting 1 acre for existing residential structures as the program requires. Now, this property was formerly enrolled in the assessor's farm and agricultural land classification, along with their son's adjacent 35 acres, and they were raising cattle. However, their son last year sold his property. So due to a smaller property size under 20 acres and inability to demonstrate a minimum annual commercial ag income to stay in the program, the Clements received a notice of removal from the assessor's office, and they've applied for reclassification under open space. The Clements property is located in the Southwest Olympia area on Maple Valley Road Southwest, which lies south of State Highway 8 West and northwest of Delphi Road Southwest. Historically, this and surrounding properties made up one larger parcel, which is operated as a family dairy. The property is also located in the Deschutes Water Resource Inventory area, or RIA 13, and situated in the McLean Creek Basin. The Clements currently graze their neighbors' cattle on the property, and they intend to continue grazing cattle. As you can see in the pictures and in the aerial map, the property is mostly open and suitable for livestock grazing. While there is a small forested area on the southwestern corner of the property, historically this was used both for grazing and to provide shelter for livestock during extreme weather. And I did observe during my site visit that approximately half the understory of the forest does contain suitable pasture grasses. To conserve their property for long-term agricultural use, as described in their land conservation plan, the Clements propose to maintain open pasture for grazing. This will be done by the act of grazing itself and also through mowing and brush clearing as needed. They will maintain pasture fences and manage non-native plants, particularly Himalayan blackberry, within the forested portion of the property. They'll also conduct erosion control measures. This will include rotational grazing. As I mentioned, the cattle they're grazing belong to their neighbor, so it's very easy to move the animals on and off site as needed. They'll also limit the number of cattle grazing at any point in time to be no more than 10 head of cattle. Currently there's 4. They'll maintain a grass stubble height of at least 3 inches. And they'll exclude cattle from the understory of the forested area during wetter periods of the year so as not to damage vegetation. In overview, the Clements property meets the criteria for enrollment under the Farm and Agricultural Conservation Land category for 3 points and a 50% reduction based on the following factors. The property was previously classified as farm and agricultural land under the assessor's program, but no longer qualifies. The landscape of the property remains open and suitable for grazing. And supporting documents, including a land conservation plan, were submitted with the application materials. Enrollment of the Clements property in open space creates an opportunity to preserve farmland for future agricultural use in Thurston County. And after review of application materials, the Clements application meets the eligibility for the classification of 4 acres, qualifying at a 50% reduction as open space land for current use assessment. I thank you for your time, commissioners, and reviewing the application and for your decision to set a public hearing for March 5th. Open space application. Are there any questions?
Yeah, we do have some questions. We're going to start online with Commissioner Pestinger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Marissa. Questions about the property itself. So I think maybe that's slide, can't tell what slide number, but looking at the photograph, the aerial photograph, it's got the green line around just the 1 acre with the house on it. And then directly north of that, it looks like 2 small buildings, very small, and then northwest of that, 2 large buildings. Does the fact that there's so many other buildings within the 4 acres make any impact on the decision? And then I have a couple other questions after that.
Going to lie outside their property boundary. The red line represents the entire acreage of the Clements property, and the blue line is just showing the home site exclusion area.
Oh, I see. It's not all the way out to the yellow. I'm sorry. Next question is timing on this, or I guess an easier question. You mentioned 3 points. What's the total amount of possible points that could be earned by any property?
The total is 9 points, Andrew, for this. That's a 12.
Yeah, it depends on the number of resources that qualify. You know, they could apply for many points. They would need up to 7 to get another, you know, to the next reduction bracket, and 11 or more, I believe it is, to get even higher. But in this instance, these applicants only applied to come into the Farm and Ag Conservation.
Public access provides you quite a few points, I think. Don't they?
Yeah. It's a variety of different.
That's perfect. That's the answer I was looking for. Thank you so much. And then the last question is timing. So with the timing of this, it mentions long-term ag commitments and things like that. Is this being signed up for 1 year and has to be renewed every year? Is it signed up right now and if we approve it, then it's good forever? What are the timing elements to how long this has to be maintained this way and how long it lasts in a tax deduction?
Timeline. Generally like land conservation plans or habitat management plans for other categories need to cover a time period of at least 20 or 30 years with the assumption they could go beyond. So yeah, it's definitely more than a year, and there are penalties for withdrawing a property or tax penalties for withdrawing a property from open space. So it's generally a disincentive to withdraw.
Maybe Commissioner Nelson knows this better than anybody else. Does a farm plan expire due to time or only from change of use? Or maybe one of you know this?
The ones I know of are just their farm plans, and they're there and they kind of get reviewed somewhat regular, not real, but yeah, mostly the changes happen when you decide that you want to change something you're doing.
Is this open space tax credit tied to having an active farm plan? I thought I read something about a farm plan in here.
Whether they're going to maintain the property so it could be available for agricultural use in the future. They are actively grazing. However, enrollment in open space for applicants such as this who have left the assessors program doesn't require active farming, and it doesn't require any minimum commercial ag income. It's just basically maintaining the property for future agricultural use.
It requires a conservation proposal, but that does not have to be the same thing as a farm plan. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else have any questions on this?
You mentioned at some point that they had planned to limit the number of animals to 10.
That would be the maximum. Yeah, currently
Is-
they have 4.
Okay, so I'm just, is that their plan? Is that something that the county asked for? Is that?
That was their plan, because they need to demonstrate how they would minimize, erosion control risks as well as how they would maintain the property.
I just ask because one of the big things that's going on now is called regenerative ag. And part of what they do in that is you take, where I would take a certain number of cows and put them in a pasture, wanting them to graze it for a certain amount of time. These people put cows in pastures and they might take them out after. There's people that move their cows twice a day. And so that may fit their plan now. I don't know if that's how that's going to work in the future. And I always have concerns about putting that in documents, then they have to come, if they want to do something different, if they have to come to the county and say, hey, we want to do something different. And it's really not going to change anything.
And the main thing is they're just gonna monitor it also, and if it seems like it's getting overgrazed, they could adjust, and it is at least very easy to move the cattle on and off the site since their neighbor has fenced in paddocks and pastures and was working with them.
Does anybody else have anything? Go ahead.
What's the current zoning designation for the property?
Recording is up current, so
It was in the staff report.
Yeah.
Do you have that?
I can pull the staff report up.
It's a 1-5.
Yeah, exactly.
I know that when we've asked about things like this before, it's really hard to pin down very accurate numbers, but is there a rough estimate on what the Clements are paying to the county to try to enroll in this with their fees and everything else? And then what the possible savings to them on their property taxes are going to be in maybe this year or next year? And I know that they can't do exacts because they don't do the assessments ahead of time, but we can kind of get an idea of, if they're spending $2,000 to enroll in this program and it saves them 38 cents a year. I mean, that's a decision they can make and county benefits from it, but I think that it'd be good for us to know roughly what those numbers are.
Well, to address your first question, you were asking what the current open space fee is for application.
Application.
That is currently $1,700 or $1,728. And I did actually discuss this with Dorina Baird. This particular property, the assessor's office wouldn't at this point in time be able to provide an estimate for their tax savings. And that's because they need to do an assessment to obtain the full market value on the 1 acre exclusion area. And that's what they would use for the basis for what the 50% reduction would be for the remaining 4 acres enrolled. And so the way she explained it, like that factor in addition to the fact that the taxes change each year, prevent them from being able to provide an estimate in this case.
Do we know what the current taxes are on this property right now?
I'm not aware of what the current taxes are on this property.
We could find that out and bring it back at the next planning session.
Bring that information to you.
These folks are looking at 1723 to you, and then they had to get a survey done, and then they hired a consultant. They're in this pretty deep, it sounds like, and it sounds like I don't know how much money they're gonna save every year on their taxes, but is there, obviously the county's benefiting from this anytime we set aside land like this. This is a good thing. Does the county get any other benefits by being able to use this for any mitigation on any other program? Or just the fact that we get to set this aside and it's not gonna get developed?
Correct.
And I think to the point on how much they're gonna save. If they're currently in the assessors program and they're switching to this program. When they come to us with what they're paying in taxes now, they're gonna be paying more.
Yeah.
And
End up paying more than they are. Likely, they will end up paying more than they currently do, but less than if their entire property was taxed at full market value. And also, by transferring from the assessors program into the boards program, they do not have to pay the back taxes, the 7 years worth of back property taxes that they would pay. if They were completely removed from.
But if they come out of this program and develop the property, then they have to pay those back taxes.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yes.
All right, well, anybody have any other questions or comments on this? With that, would we consider a motion on it?
No, throw the last slide up, Melissa. Okay, I don't think so.
Oh, it's not.
first one,
Move
isn't
to
it?
set a public hearing for March 15th, 2023 at 7 PM or soon thereafter, as the matter may be heard, to accept public comments for the Clements open space application.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to set a public hearing for March 15th, 2023 at 7 PM or as soon as thereafter as the matter may be heard to accept public comments for the Clements open space application. Call for the vote.
Commissioner Day.
Aye.
Commissioner Helverton.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Carmen.
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson.
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons.
Aye.
Commissioner Wheatley. Aye. Commissioner Passenger.
Aye.
Commissioner Casino.
Aye. So we have a public hearing set. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, with that, we're going to move on to item 6 of continued business, a work session on the procedural and clerical code update, A29, A13, and A28 with staffers Andrew and Amelia.
Sure. Okay. Good afternoon, planning commissioners. My name is Andrew Bond, an associate planner with community planning. I'm joined with Amelia Schwartz, who is also within community planning. And today we're going to discuss the code clarifications and corrections amendment. This is the second work session with you guys. And we will have a few options for you guys for the planning commission to consider later on in this presentation.
So tonight we're going to continue review of the code clarifications and corrections, which includes A13 miscellaneous clerical errors, which we introduced today. A28 clarification on expansion of non-conforming non-residential uses and structures. And A29 updates land board posting procedure. We will also be doing a follow-up to the commissioner question on A28. And we'll have an optional motion to set a public hearing for March 15th. So A28 will be returning to this for the question is the clarification on expansion of non-conforming non-residential uses and structures. Specifically, in this case, it was based off of an academic school. So the question that we went ahead and looked into was, could code changes be applied to other public facilities? So in our code, public facility uses such as fire and police stations and government buildings, they do not have the same constraints regarding building and lot coverage as academic schools do.
So I'm going to dive into A13 miscellaneous clerical errors. And this docket item is a reoccurring docket item that we have maintained on our development code docket to provide us a little flexibility when we need to make some small corrections throughout the code. Has been docketed since 2018. Some of the challenges that we're hoping to address are correcting some outdated names and agency names, misplaced graphics, missing definitions, incorrect code references, and spelling mistakes. So one of the primary changes you're going to see throughout the code is the name change from Resource Stewardship Department to the Community Planning and Economic Development Department, as well as Olympic Regional Clean Air Agency. We also relocated graphics and figures from the back of a chapter that was kind of lost to its own distinct chapter with searchable code sections. So when an applicant is looking for a specific term, they will be able to search that and they'll find the graphic much easier. We created and revised definitions. The created definitions were already referenced as permitted uses. And so now we're just backfilling a definition in there. And finally, we're just going through and correcting spelling mistakes, incorrect references, and other random clerical errors throughout the code. Following our materials being forwarded, we did receive a proposal from Commissioner Halverson related to electric vehicle charging stations. And that was an amendment to the definition. And so part of the materials that you received at your desk, it's two parts. We provided the optional definition. If the Planning Commission is comfortable with that, they can make a vote and we can include that in the definition at the end of the presentation. So process to date, we have been working around on the code clarifications. We've been acquiring all of those throughout the years. In 2022, we established the 2022-2023 development code docket, which included the 3 docket items that you're seeing tonight. This past fall, we did research and internal review and began to develop the code. And then obviously 2 weeks ago, we had a work session discussing A28 and A29. We're at the work session tonight and potentially have a public hearing for March 15th if the Planning Commission is comfortable with that. I've provided a optional motion for the Planning Commission if there's no outstanding issues. And that concludes my presentation and we're available for any questions that you might have.
Do we have any questions for, go ahead.
Well, thanks Doug for the ED, because I had that too. I noticed that one.
Was Barry.
Oh, was it Barry? Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
But I had another one that was just really minor and quibbling, but it was page 13. Let's see, page 13, and it was just, 42.5 dwelling, 2-family dwelling. I was just curious, why isn't that just a duplex? 2-family dwelling means a residential building containing exactly 2, et cetera.
The 2-family part comes with the open duplex is kind of a specific housing type. And 2-family allows that flexibility that can be attached to like a 2-family townhouse, a 2-family duplex, all very distinct in nature. And you begin to see that in codes that are kind of going through these updates to very like hammer in the different types of dwelling units. And it's easier just to keep it slightly generic and saying just 2-family. After 2-family, we get into the multifamily realm and kind of going up from there.
So that's what you're really distinguishing is 2-family versus multifamily. Okay, you get it.
Anything else?
Could you really quickly go back to the language for electric vehicles? Because I wonder if we're gonna take something that's more like just a feature in a parking lot and now be defining it as a service station.
That was my concern too.
Yeah.
You know, QFC has, and other places have charging stations in it. Now, is it a service station now? You know, I'm
Not
looking at
class
the
one.
word and versus the word or, but I wouldn't want it, parking lot of a grocery store to be considered a service station.
And for like stormwater management purposes, they have like those types of, they have different codes for different types of businesses essentially. And that might be lumping a parking lot with a charging station in with a gas station.
Yeah, the way I looked at it was that what it says is that is used for the sale of gasoline or other motor fuels, electric vehicle charging stations, oil, lubricants, and auto accessories. Because what they're required to do under federal law now is if you're so far, building a gas station is so far from a interchange on an interstate, you're required to put in charging stations now if it's a new facility. So it is, they're selling it. You gotta put your credit card in there. And when you pull your credit card out, you get charged for so many amps of usage off that machine. So,
One additional note related to that, in the charging stations that you see at grocery stores and those kind of retail establishments, those are generally considered accessory uses. And so what this would be is its own distinct use, automobile service station, which could include all of the items listed, as well as if the board, the planning commission is comfortable, electric vehicle. So it would be a service station that could be entirely electric. That makes sense. Yeah, everything else is usually accessory.
That kind of wording,
I'm sorry?
which could include, like you do in the last sentence, which may or may not include washing, lubrication, and other motor servicing.
So would you like us to just change that and to or? In leave the first sentence?
I just want to make sure that it's not every station, everything that has a charging station is considered a service station, and whatever words we got to put in there to do that.
So it sounds like if we move electric vehicle charging stations down behind which may include
Electrical and washing, lubricant.
washing.
That would make sense to me.
Makes sense.
I agree with Doug.
That's fine. Thanks for the explanation.
Well, I guess first we should probably, do we have any other questions on any of these particular issues? Okay. We'll take-
So on page 6, department means shall always mean. Development department. Probably can get rid of the shall always mean.
Oh, means shall always mean.
Great catch. On page 14. Recreation outdoor. Then it follows out. Says see passive recreation, and then there's the definition there. And I think for examples, but not limited to, because there's a lot of outdoor recreation that's not passive recreation. Could you repeat that? So on 111.3, recreation outdoor, it says for examples of activities, see recreation passive. I think it should probably say for examples of, but not limited to. Or I mean, I don't know.
There is that language already built into passive. For the purpose of this chapter, passive recreation includes, but not limited to, hiking, canoeing, viewing nature. Passive recreation.
But what about the other activities? I think I see where.
Well, that's in 111.3, it does say for examples.
And then in 111.5, it actually does have that they're not limited to.
I think the issue might be that the way we've defined outdoor recreation here, the examples are only passive recreation examples.
Right.
As opposed to examples of other, of possibly outdoor recreation.
How would you like to change it?
Well, I have a question. I mean, is that the intention? And it's all, in other words, it can't be, I don't know, dirt bikes or something like that. I mean,
Yeah,
I
that
guess
would
the question
be-
is what's active versus passive, and then is the intention indeed to make it only passive?
And I think that would lead me to think that I guess it's like not, but not limited to, maybe the active recreation might be too narrow a definition. Usually performed with others requiring equipment taking place in prescribed places, sites, fields. Like, where is dirt bike riding
Yeah.
in these definitions? It's very clearly outdoor recreation. It's not passive, and it doesn't fit, at least very well, if not at all, the active recreation definition.
Dirt bike specifically, that wouldn't fit the minimally disruptive.
Since I think it kind of ties with non-motorized activity, there's and keep in mind that the recreation outdoors is, we're backfilling a definition as a permitted use within a residential zoning district. And so part of the suggestion from current planning was potentially mimicking the passive, because it's the least intrusive type of outdoor recreation that you can find. And that can be through open space within the subdivision, things like that. Because it's nature viewing and nature study, and so on. So that was, I think, the mentality in our approach. Obviously, we can adjust it if you feel that it should be better geared towards one or another. Or as such.
Well, I guess my concern would be then. I mean, granted, it's not. It's a passive says. Not limited to, but. I'm concerned that, I mean. Let's take one that's not listed in either one, hunting. You know. And I understand in a subdivision, when you've got people on houses next to each other, you probably don't want hunting. But what about, you know, the person that has 40 acres of forest land? What about the people that have acres of farmland?
There's one other piece. So how we do these ordinances, if there's a new section that's added, we add the section that's before and the section after. I can't necessarily speak to, there might be multiple recreations that aren't even listed presently in this code. I was attempting to pull it up as we speak, just to see if there's any others, because dwelling, for example, there's like 7 different types of dwelling, but we only listed a few of those, just because those were the ones that we were touching, or if we were adding, we added the one prior and the one after, because we have to make sure it matches the numerical order established already within the definitions chapter. And so
What would happen if for that definition, we just said outdoor recreation means leisure activities performed outdoors and just left it at that?
everyone agrees, we just strike that out and keep that definition as he states.
Yeah, I think that could work. The other thing just jumps out to me is if this definition of outdoor recreation essentially just points to the definition of passive recreation and is intended to help clarify what types of recreation might be appropriate in like subdivisions. Do you need an outdoor recreation definition? Couldn't you just say passive recreation?
It's put in there because outdoor recreation is mentioned elsewhere in the code, but there's no even attempt at a definition.
Okay.
So this is like, here's a definition, also examples in this reference. Passive. So that's actually the definitions we have added are to link these existing words that have no definitions to some sort of stable foundation.
And my thought is if there are references to this phrase that don't have a definition, but the definition is just passive recreation, instead of creating a new definition, just replace outdoor recreation with passive recreation.
Yeah, that makes sense because I mean, playing baseball is outdoor recreation. I mean, it's kind of weird to say that it isn't.
Right.
So.
It's kind of a little bit of 6 of one, half dozen of another, honestly. It seems like it's functional, but it might be a little bit more parsimonious to just not use the outdoor recreation, just say passive recreation, or maybe change it to passive outdoor recreation and strike.
But there's
11.3.
other places in the code that specifically address outdoor recreation, isn't there?
So we change the definition, we then have to go to the specific chapter that references that as a use and change that.
To passive recreation.
Does active and passive apply to both indoor and outdoor?
I would say based on these
Yes.
definitions, it apply either way.
Okay, then we should, then I assume in the code it says, if it's talking about it, it says outdoor passive. Or outdoor recreation on a passive nature or whatever it's there. So it does explain that. So you do need the definition for outdoor recreation. That is, outdoor recreation is recreation done outdoors.
So could we just use the truncated definition then?
Yeah, could you say that again? I didn't-
So just, outdoor recreation means leisure activities performed outdoor,
Period.
period.
And you can play with those words all you want.
It's amazing. Yeah.
It's kind of unnecessary.
It's necessary, but it's
Are we
great.
all in general consensus?
We're all unanimously, yeah, go, for it, yeah.
So redacted.
Did Kevin hear that?
Commissioner Pestinger, were you okay with that suggested definition?
Totally, and I really like the word parsimonious at Derek East.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioner Nelson, you had another one?
So on the sign code. And this is the last section on all of them. Says if for some reason the.
Where you at,
Page
Scott?
Page 21, thank you. At the very bottom. Number 6. If for some reason the required posted signboards in the area or on the site for which the public hearing is being held is inadvertently moved through no fault of the county, this in no way invalidates the legal notice requirement of the scheduled public hearing or other public comment opportunity. I think after the county should put or applicant.
Okay.
Because that language kind of leaves it open to, I put out a sign, I go out the next day and take it up. It's not the county's fault, but it's gone.
Are we all in general consensus?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And that happens a couple other places, so. I don't know
Yeah.
if you want to go through them all or.
Yeah.
I'll make a change to all of the different sign codes.
Anything else, Commissioner Nelson?
That's it for me, I think.
Go ahead.
Is there a reduction in the permit fee due to the applicant posting instead of the staff taking 3 hours out of their day and doing it?
There is not. The current sign posting is not technically included within the fee. It's an additional service that the county currently conducts. Based on how it was described to me by one of the senior planners in Building Development Center, it's not technically considered part of the hourly time dedicated to a permit review.
So they pay an extra fee to have that done?
They don't pay a fee at all.
Well, who pays for it?
The budget.
Everybody else? Involved in the budget?
So it comes out of CPED's general fund?
Yeah, it has to come out of somewhere.
I don't know the specific budget line items, but the hourly rate that the current planners are paid, outside of the permit fees that cover their overarching.
So I'll
She'll
weigh
make it
in
sound
there.
a little nicer.
So effectively, yes, it could reduce the overall fee that the applicant pays because it would reduce the overall time in which the permitter spent on the permit review. Permitters are tracking their time for how and when and how much, time they work on a particular, I have a touch screen, I apparently touched it. How much time they actually spend on a particular permit. So by allowing them to ask the applicant to post this, it reduces their overall time on that particular review for that project, because they're actually able to spend it in the office doing that review and moving it forward. Does that
Yeah, the
help?
only thing I would correct you there on, Chris, is we're not asking the applicant to do it. We're saying the applicant shall, and we're telling them they're going to do it.
That's true.
So.
So it didn't sound like there's any deduct for it.
So we will not be changing the base fee at this point in time, because that is an hourly rate for everything that the permitter does. However, when we do those charges, so I'll walk you through an example, be easier that way. So when an applicant comes in with their application, we say, great, there's a base fee that you have to pay. Please provide us that fee, and they intake the application. When we go and do the review, every hour above that base fee, we know what that minimum is, we charge back to the applicant. So that's where the savings would be found. If it takes us 2 hours and our base fees are based on 3 or 4 hours of staff work on an application. So if it takes us 2 hours to do a posting, that's 2 extra hours that we actually have to take to in-house to actually review their application to ensure that it is meeting code.
So then they won't charge an extra fee for it.
Correct. We would not be charging that additional time.
Okay. Then my next. Wait a minute. On the. I just need to understand this, it's page 41. From a diagram showing the completed coverage for the residents. Why is not the overhang and the carport part of that?
So this graphic is a relic from the graphics that live within the code. And so what we did with this code is we reached out to the current planning staff and gave them all of the graphics, and they provided yes, keep, no, keep this in the code. It's not relevant, or it's not right anymore. And so this was one of their recommendations to keep within the code. And so we brought that over, established it within 2065 and created that reference. Now that this is in here, there is the option, a much easier option to replace the graphic in the future if codes change or things like that change, because there's already a call out specific to this, and it would just be more swapping the graphic out.
So we don't have a particular understanding of everything in the picture, but if at a later point, somebody puts in a docket item or part of a docket item to replace it, we can and easily find it.
That's why you moved it, but if you're looking at computed coverage for a house, is that how you do it? You not include carports and overhangs?
I'm unfortunately not able to answer that question. I don't do the permitting side.
As a reference in the Shoreline Master Program, if my house burns down, or if I want to add to it, and as long as I stay under the roof, the overhang and porch stuff that's existing, I can do that. And here you're saying the coverage is just a house, so it's different. Is that the way it's defined?
I will look into that further.
Good point. I don't know.
That's a good point. And I think that's it.
Does anybody else have anything on this? Does any of this prevent anybody from wanting to set a public hearing? Because if not, I'd certainly entertain a motion on it.
Yeah, I'll move to set a public hearing for March 15th, 2023 at 7 p.m. or as soon thereafter as the matter may be heard on the code clarifications and corrections amendment, which includes development code docket item A313, miscellaneous clerical errors, A28, clarification on expansion of non-conforming non-residential uses and structures, and A29, update signboard posting procedures as amended during this work session.
Is there a second? Been seconded. The motion is to move to set a public hearing for March 15th, 2023 at 7 p.m. or as soon thereafter as the matter may be heard on the code clarification and corrections amendment, which includes development code docket item A13, miscellaneous clerical errors, A28, clarification on expansion of non-conforming non-residential uses and structures, and A29, update signboard posting procedures. Call for the vote.
Commissioner Day?
Aye.
Commissioner Helverson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Commissioner Carmen?
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson?
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons?
Aye.
Commissioner Wheatley?
Aye.
Commissioner Passenger?
Aye.
Commissioner Casino?
Aye, that motion passes unanimously. So we have a public hearing set for March 15th at 7 p.m. Thank you very much. All right, next on our list is item 7.5, an update on Thurston 2045. And I believe Maya's gonna take care of that one. Great.
Good evening, Commissioners. Maya Teeple, Senior Planner with Community Planning. I will share my screen. So I have a short PowerPoint for the Planning Commission tonight at your request and at the request of some public comment we've received. We're bringing back the scope of work, which we have been developing over the last few months based on the survey results and also the public comment that we've received from the community. So for today's work session, I'm going to cover just a brief background about what the periodic update is, a general overview of the scope of work, timeline for the comp plan, and the next steps in the ask for the Planning Commission. So at this meeting, I'm just providing an overview of the scope items and the work program. And for the March 15th meeting, what we'll be asking of our Planning Commission is to rank the optional updates in order of highest to lowest. And we'll facilitate this similar to how we do with our county commissioners. Each planning commissioner will have a rank list, and then we tally those up and kind of average them. And then that information we'll bring to our county commissioners at a later date. So just an overview of the periodic update. Thurston 2045 is what we're referring to this as because it will plan for the next 20 years in Thurston County out to the year 2045. And the county is periodically required under state law to update the comprehensive plan to bring it up to date to all the changes that have happened in state law. And so this occurs on a 10-year cycle now. It was previously an 8-year cycle, but that was just updated in 2021. And the goal of the periodic update is really to do a holistic look at the comprehensive plan and bring pieces of the plan that are out of date with state law and changes in state law back up to date with that. So it ensures we're consistent with the Growth Management Act, and it's not a full repeal and replace, and it's not necessarily a full revisioning. So we do some visioning and open houses with the community, but it's not a complete rework of the entire plan. It's building off of existing information that is already in there. And this periodic update will be due on June 30th of 2025, and that's under state law. So just to provide an overview of annual versus periodic updates, Thurston County does both, and they're two separate pathways. So annual amendments, which are, this is optional, jurisdictions don't have to consider annual amendments, but it's a pathway for community members to request changes. And this is, in Thurston County, this is how most citizen requested rezones come through. So Thurston County takes these applications on an ongoing basis, and then the Board of County Commissioners sets a 2-year docket, and that is the list of annual amendments, not only to our development code, but to our comprehensive plan. So most of the items that the Planning Commission has been reviewing as of recently are those annual amendments that fall on those dockets. The periodic update, however, is the required update under state law, and this is the big refresher of the comprehensive plan. It brings it up to date. It takes a look at most of the policies and chapters and all of the elements that we're required to do under state law, and just updates that information based on new population projections, changes, and anything else that we need to take a look at. And as I mentioned, this big periodic update that's coming up will be due in June of 2025. So what is a comprehensive plan? This sets the guiding principles and visions for how and where development occurs, and it's really the visionary document for Thurston County. And this document feeds into the regulations that go into the development code and how they're applied on the ground. So there are 13 planning goals under state law that guide the comprehensive plan. Those are concentrating your urban growth within the urban growth areas in the cities, reducing sprawl outside of those urban growth areas, considering things like transportation, economic development, affordable housing, property rights. Predictable permitting is a good one, big one for state law. And then other things like natural resource industries, open space and recreation, environmental protection, and the rest of the list here. Our last periodic update we finished in 2019, so not too long ago. We were the last update was due in 2016, and it took us a few years after that due date. So we completed it about 4 years ago. And Thurston County's comprehensive plan has our chapters, 13 chapters that are broken up to what you see here. Some of the chapters align with the elements under state law, but a lot of the state law elements that are required are just spread throughout the whole comp plan. So they kind of touch a lot of the chapters. So going into the scope of work, and we've broken this up into required and optional updates. One of the commissioners here has mentioned a couple times about the term scope of work. We regularly do the work that we are required to do to bring the plan up to date under state law. And so the required piece is it's a list basically of the work that we're going to have to complete. It's more of a work program. The real question here is the optional updates, and that's what we focus the discussion with our county commissioners on, and what we'll be focusing the discussion tonight on with the Planning Commission. These are kind of the extra projects that we're not required to do, but they might be good ideas or add value to the plan, and or their community priority is a big thing. So how is the scope of work drafted? The first thing that feeds into drafting the scope of work are the checklists from the Department of Commerce. And there's 2 checklists, a critical areas checklist and a planning checklist for fully planning counties and cities. And we work through those as staff. We review our regulations. It's kind of a high-level review of our regulations and our comprehensive plan to make sure we are meeting the criteria that's in those checklists and what we need to do updates to in order to bring the plan up to date with state law. And so that will identify a number of updates that end up being required. The second piece that has fed into drafting the scope of work and work program for the periodic update are the priorities that the community has identified. And as we mentioned in November to the Planning Commission, we had a survey go out. It was very general questions, and that was intentional. We really wanted to identify what were the highest priorities of the community members, what were the big takeaway projects that they want the county to focus on over the next 20 years. And so we held that survey. We got around almost 1,000 responses, which is very, very good for public participation in at the county level. And so we had a great turnout at that survey, and I'll go over some of the results in this presentation. And then some of the optional updates that are included are just based on anticipated changes to state law over the next couple of years. So they're not required right now, but there is a possibility that they may be soon. And then just changing local trends in Thurston County, you know, what's going on locally that we are dealing with that might not necessarily be a trigger under state law yet. So looking at the survey report, and I believe this is online now. We're shuffling our website, so I've asked that this be put online, but this has just been completed within the last week or so. And the top priorities that were identified from that community survey, the top 4 listed were to protect wildlife habitat, flood areas, landslide areas, and surface and groundwater. A big focus on water in that survey. And the second top identified priority was prepare for climate change and take actions towards reducing impacts. We received a lot of comment to include references and work from the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. And so that was a huge thing that we got out of that survey that the community has identified as a priority to them. And then the third and fourth priorities identified were to protect agriculture and increase availability of affordable housing. And so there were a lot of other things included in that survey. And as I mentioned, that survey report, it should be on the website now. If it's not, it will be by next week. And there were free response comments. So we got a lot of feedback from the community that way that we'll be bringing to the county commissioners for their consideration too. So looking at required updates, as I mentioned, these are the updates that we're required to do to meet changes in state law. And we take a holistic look at the plan. We incorporate new information and new planning documents. And all of these elements that are listed here are considered the required updates that we will be doing for the periodic updates. So there will be updates to the land use element to update population projections, building intensities, housing densities, the updates to the natural resource element and the rural element. There will be a major update to the housing element, and that's new, that has come down with the recent state law and House Bill 1220. So there will be significant updates not only in the housing chapter, but across the plan with the changes in state law around that. There are updates to the capital facilities element and utilities element. Those are typically smaller, but just taking a look at changes in the county and updating any inventory or projections for those types of uses. The transportation element gets a big refresher with the periodic update, and that includes looking at level of services and also inventory of facilities and any actions that we need to bring those facilities up to date with the level of services. And then parks and recreation element. We have a parks and recreation element, and we update that so it matches some of our other recently updated plans like the parks, open space, and trails plan. And then the last 3 items on the right side of the slide. So land use and zoning corrections. This is kind of a placeholder. Every time we do a periodic update, we will do some corrections to our land use and zoning. The joint plan updates that we haven't yet complete will get folded into this periodic update. And then any development regulation changes needed to bring our development regulations up to date with state law. And there are a number of those, but a big piece of that will be incorporating any changes based on that housing element into our development regulations. And there are some other pieces related to reviewing certain types of regulations that fall into there as well. So all of that's required. That'll be part of the work program for the comp plan. Those are kind of the non-negotiables. And looking into the optional updates, this is where I'll spend a little bit more time going through these. These are, again, not required, but they might add value. And most of these are based on community priorities or local trends that we're seeing in Thurston County. Some of these are also anticipated changes in state law. So the climate change element, we know that's not required right now and yet, but it's gone through legislature the last couple of years and come pretty close. So there's a chance in the future that'll become a requirement. So the implementation plan, this would be a new appendix to the comprehensive plan. And there is a new requirement under state law that the counties and cities have to do a 5-year progress report that monitors how we've implemented any changes that come out of this periodic update. And so having a separate appendix that is an implementation plan that has specific metrics and measurables for tracking how we're meeting our goals and policies will help us when we have to do that 5-year progress reporting requirement. So this would really add some measurable metrics to the to a new appendix so we can track how we're doing in implementing policies across the plan. Future land use update. This has been included as an optional update based on some trends that we've seen in Thurston County. So currently Thurston County's future land use and zoning is 1-to-1, which means all of our land use matches all of our zoning. And consequently, anytime anyone wants to do a zoning change on their property, they have to apply for a comprehensive plan amendment and go through the legislative process, which includes docketing and a full change to the comprehensive plan. And that's costly to applicants, and it's also very, very time consuming. So what this optional update would do is really set and establish a vision for land use in the rural areas of the county and potentially in the urban growth areas. It just depends on kind of the scope of this item. But it would set general land use categories that several zones can fall into, and that may alleviate some of the time and cost burden for certain types of rezone requests, but not necessarily all. So, you know, if you have someone who wants to do industrial and it's a residential land use, they would still have to go through the comp plan amendment process, but smaller landowners that are looking to change the type of residential within an area might have a quicker route to complete that kind of work. This update specifically would pair well with some of the other ones. So the next one I'll talk about is incorporating findings from the countywide industrial lands study. So we do have a currently docketed item to complete a countywide industrial lands study, and that's underway right now. We have a hired third-party consultant who is doing that work. And this item would take the reports and the findings that come out of that project and incorporate them into the comprehensive plan. So this is one item that would potentially pair well with a future land use update. And this could include land use and zoning changes. It could include changes to policies, or it could include changes to the Thurston County Code across titles 20 and then the urban growth area codes in 21, 22, and 23. We don't know what's going to come out of that industrial land study yet. So this one's kind of a contingent depending on what comes out of that. This, the industrial land study has been identified as a priority of the community, so we're working on that. And folks want to see that those uses are planned for accordingly. So that's why this is included as an optional update. The climate change element, again, this was one of the top items that was identified in the survey, and this is something that we expect in upcoming years may become a future requirement under the legislature, although it's not currently. This builds off existing work in the comprehensive plan. So during our last periodic update, we did start to pull in some of the climate change work that was going on in the region and update those policies and goals. And this would build off of that and include a lot more information that's come out of the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. It would require us to include greenhouse gas inventory, estimates on hazards planning. We would look into the Department of Commerce model language and element that they're working on in creating this, and just really build a new element that addresses this very specifically. There may also be development code changes that come out of including climate change as a new element. The economic element, so we do have an economic chapter in our comprehensive plan, and while this is technically a requirement under state law, state hasn't allotted funding for it, and so they don't require it as part of the periodic updates. We did complete a fairly robust update to our economic element in 2019 when we did our last periodic update, and we had a third party work on that and complete that work. And this would just review and revise that element based on any changes in local trends. And then finally, the last optional element is the health element. So this is not a requirement under state law, and a robust update was done to this in 2019 as well. And we had our Public Health and Social Services Department with Thurston County do most of that work to bring it up to date with the changes in Thurston Thrives and all of the other county plans that are going on. Before it was updated in 2019, it hadn't been updated since like 2008, so it was long overdue. But now we have a lot more recent information in there, and this optional element would just review and revise based on any new information that's come out since the last periodic update. So just to recap, ask for the Planning Commission of the optional elements that were included in the survey, this PowerPoint tonight, just to rank from your highest priority to your lowest priority. I'll try and work up a sheet so that that's easy for the Planning Commission to do at the March 15th meeting. And then March 1st, we're going to have an initial briefing with the Board of County Commissioners. That is basically going to be this presentation that you just had. So we will introduce this scope of work and some of the optional updates that the board can consider. March 15th, we'll bring this back to the Planning Commission. I'll try and include the survey report at that meeting so that you all have a copy of it, along with other things. And then in late March or early April, I'll bring the Planning Commission's rankings to the Board of County Commissioners, and we'll continue those scope of work and work program discussions with the board. All of this leads up to the board adopting a scope of work for Thurston 2045 by resolution. And then in July, we will be applying for state grant funding to complete the periodic update. And so that concludes my PowerPoint, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to start out with Commissioner Pestinger, please.
Thank you, Chair Casino. Thank you, Maya. Looking at slide 9, the top priorities of the community, you list those top 4 as 57%. Can you talk about what those numbers, 57%, 47% means? Does that mean 57% of people who filled it out listed this as one of their choices or options, or they listed it as their top option?
Yeah, that's a great question, Commissioner Pestinger. So 57% of people who filled out the survey identified this as one of their top 4 priorities. And then we weighted the averages of those. So
thank you. Going down to the optional updates, slide number 14, or incorporate countywide industrial lands. It mentions it's a priority of the community. Could you tell us what the percent was for that?
So I would have to pull up the survey report, which I'm happy to do, but it's going to take me a minute. So in the survey, citing, the way we phrased it was citing lands for industrial uses. And that was actually, I believe it was either the bottom ranked priority or the second to the bottom ranked priority in the survey to cite new lands for industrial uses. But the priority of the community here is the specific docket item to do the countywide industrial lands study. And what we've heard from the community during the docket comment period now and in previous years is that they want a holistic look, and they want these land use changes to be considered holistically and not kind of on a one-off. So the priority of the community here is the holistic look piece, not necessarily citing new industrial lands.
And so that's not on the basis of the survey, that's on the basis of other comments.
Correct. That's on the basis of other comments.
Commissioner Wheatley?
Can I just ask a clarifying question about the industrial land study? So is that gonna be sort of like the buildable lands report where you're looking at, is there sufficient industrial land where it's currently zoned? Is that the basic question of this study? Or
Yes. Yes, that's spot on, and it goes a little bit beyond that, and it will look at the current regulations for industrial uses, not only in rural county, but I think we're also looking at some of the commercial zones and commercial and industrial zones within the urban growth areas and the regulations that are in the Thurston County Code and what kind of uses are allowed in those areas. So it goes a step further beyond where are we citing industrial lands? Do we need more? Yes or no, based on current trends and permit trends and things we're seeing, but also looking into the development regulations and seeing how are those working for these types of uses? Are we seeing folks go a general commercial route and applying for more industrial-esque uses in commercial areas or vice versa? So.
And just a further question on that, who's doing the study? Is it TRPC or is it the county or?
TRPC is not doing the study. We rely on their buildable lands report, which feeds into this in part, but we have a third-party consultant, is it Mall Foster? Chris, do I have that right?
So we went out on RFP to get the contractor, and that was done late last year, and they were the winning contracting bid.
Could I request that we see the RFP, just so we have a lot of clarity about what?
Sure, I think it's still on the website, so we can find that link.
Is that referencing CPA 8? That's the county-wide study for industrial lands?
Yes.
Okay, so that's on the comprehensive plan amendment docket for the 2022, 2023.
Right. Start the, right.
So when is the contractor supposed to have that information to us?
December.
Yep, by the end of this year, we're expecting to have some of the findings from that report.
We would take that and roll those into, that was the.
I have one last question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Pestinger.
Thank you. On slide number 5, talking about the 13 planning goals that are required by state law, you mentioned. A lot of the state law that I've looked at related to comprehensive plan requirements and growth management act requirements, et cetera, have an equity element, and yet I don't see equity mentioned anywhere in this document. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, and so equity is falling a lot under affordable housing and then the citizen participation and coordination. These goals are very vague and I didn't write the state law, but they're intentionally vague. The equity piece, most of what we're hearing coming out of that and the updates that are around that fall into the updates to the housing element and taking a look at the policies to make sure there are not racially disparate impacts and undoing that. So that's where it's pulling into. That's not to say it doesn't touch a lot of these other pieces, environmental protection, economic development. It's kind of across the board, but it's not outlined as a specific goal under state law right now. It just is intertwined in a lot of these planning goals.
Commissioner Wheatley?
Yeah, I would observe that it is, there are pretty good tools provided by Commerce at this point on planning for equity, though. And one of the really important elements of that is equity in the public participation plan. And I would like to know, I guess I'm concerned like that we're gonna be sort of moving forward off of this survey and then asking the planning commission to rank priorities, and we're going to be doing that before we see anything like an assessment of where the work needs to be done, which would certainly affect my prioritization, knowing where the important work is. But there are really, there is, I think, an expectation that there be a real effort to incorporate equity into the public participation plan. And there's a lot of guidance about doing that. And I'm really concerned about this survey because, I mean, just for example, you know, the Department of Commerce and Puget Sound Regional Council have just published a housing survey that was done statewide. It didn't unfortunately include Thurston County, but they weighted the survey in a very sophisticated way to make sure that it incorporated underrepresented communities. And that survey, the survey results were way different. You know, one of their questions was sort of about priorities, and the results were way different than what this survey shows for Thurston County. The top two by far were affordable housing and homelessness. And then the third by far was the cost of living. And then environmental kind of came up in there, but it was very different. And the sort of the difference between that sort of well done, carefully weighted survey and this one has me a bit concerned, I guess. And I would like, I mean, I guess I would like to ask, is there a breakdown of the survey method and the demographics of the response? Because that's really important to me. And I think it's kind of an expectation of the Department of Commerce and the legislature that there be a very robust equity element in the public participation plan. And it seems to me that that survey was the first, you know, kind of opening part of that public participation plan. And I'm concerned about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll touch on a couple things that you just mentioned, Commissioner Wheatley. The first being, I just checked the website and I'm not seeing the survey up there, so I'll make sure that I can provide that survey report at the next Planning Commission meeting so that you can see. It covers a lot more than, you know, that's just a snapshot of the top 4 priorities, but we had a lot of other questions and a lot of free response sections, and some of the things you're mentioning, like affordable housing and homelessness, those were actually some of the most mentioned items in the free response section. And the other thing that came up quite often that was not one of the point questions that we asked, but came up in free response, was access to medical care. So we are seeing those types of responses through this survey. And we did not collect certain demographic information, you know, and that just felt a little bit invasive for the county to be asking for and collecting, but we collected age and we also collected where people lived by zip code. So we did have that information and allowed for a little bit of anonymity in filling out the survey. And based on the type of folks we usually see engaged in our planning commission meetings and in our written public comment periods and public hearings, we had a slightly younger demographic filling out this survey. And I am happy to say that we had quite a few folks who were even of high school age and college age fill out the survey, which we typically don't see those types of people come to our meeting. That's not to say that we don't still have a long way to go. And we really made an effort to reach out to some underrepresented groups and get them involved in the survey. We did the flyers in several languages. We went to the communities and posted those flyers. We did kind of a robust effort to do that. That's the best way that we know to get out in the community and make folks aware of this. But there's a long way to go on this, and this is just the first thing. So the public participation plan is really kind of intended to morph along the way, and the big opportunity to reach those groups is in the one-on-ones and going out in the communities and holding pop-up open houses and engaging with those organizations in kind of informal presentations early on in the process. So before all the updates are done to the plan, we go out and we'll hold like a coffee chat with a group if they're interested in having us. So, we're working on building those relationships, and we do recognize we still have work to do there. But I am pleased to say that we had a good turnout at the survey that is different than the typical demographic that we see filling out these kinds of things. So.
Yeah, well, would I suggest, this is where, to me, the work plan, to me, like you said, the scope of work, you're defining in a particular way as being about the required and optional updates. But as you mentioned at the outset, it's really the work plan. They're like for the last comprehensive plan update, there was a scope of work document, which essentially was the work plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important for us to see, because that goes to where the resources are going to go into this process. And that's why there's a need to sort of include the Planning Commission in that, and also to provide maybe an opportunity for the community to learn where the greatest needs for amendment are before they're asked what their priorities are. There's kind of a step-by-step process here, to my mind, where first you kind of do the assessment of what needs to be changed, and then you also reach out to the public and ask them what needs to be changed, and then you're sort of working the work plan with that, because ultimately that goes to the commissioners as proposals about where to put the resources, how they're going to budget this, how many staff they're going to put into it. And for example, if there's a real need for a better plan for public outreach for equity, it may be that the county might decide it wants to hire someone who's expert in that to do a really good job around housing, for example, since that's such a critical part of this. And so, the resources for that kind of need to be put into place. And it's hard to see that picture if we're not seeing the work plan, essentially, or the proposed work plan. And we're not seeing the information about where it's currently in compliance and where, as you said, it's going to need a lot of work. And we all know that the housing element is one of those that's definitely going to need a lot of work, regardless of the input you get from this survey, just because the law has changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure that, for me at least, I accept that the scope of work just means sort of prioritize, that we're looking at just what are our priorities for the required and optional updates. That seems very narrow, and I'm not even sure prioritization is an acceptable process for this kind of thing. I'm sort of thinking to my Hanford Advisory Board work, where we really resisted being asked to prioritize things when there are many important things.
Commissioner Day?
Yeah, I think there's an underlying assumption in the prioritization that there is a resource scarcity. And I think I could imagine, for example, the Planning Commission making a recommendation. I could see it working where we do a prioritization amongst ourselves to understand what our relative priorities might be. But I could see us recommending something like, all of these optional elements should be included in the scope of the comprehensive plan update. I could see that being a recommendation. I could also see us thinking, a couple of these are probably lower priority. Nobody thought they were the top. Maybe we can push those to the bottom. But I do agree that prioritization might not be the right framework to get input from the Planning Commission.
Go ahead, Barry.
Chris, back in April, you gave us a memorandum subject 2022-2023 official dockets. in there, appendix B, it had a list of the approved Board of County Commissioners docket items. One was comprehensive plan amendment docket, the other was the development code amendment docket. I've been trying to keep track as to which ones we've completed and where we're at in that process. And it doesn't seem to me like we've made a lot of progress on the comprehensive plan amendment docket side. Would that be a right assumption?
That is an accurate statement.
So, and now we're getting ready to do it, the 2023-2024 process, which is what Maya just briefed us on. So my assumption is that some of these items that we didn't get done in 2022, 2023 are going to be prioritized into the 23-24 docket.
They could be, some of those are, we have, as you all are aware, the joint plans, we're further along the line, further down the line than what that particular docket shows. Because we've completed the Tumwater joint plan. We have now come through the Planning Commission with the Olympia joint plan. There will be more items that come before you. And that's one of the things that Planning Commission should be aware of, is that we are going to be, the hope for us is that we're able to clear, or to the best of our ability, minimize the number of items that we don't get to this year, so that we can focus on the comprehensive plan amendment update in full.
My recommendation would be that you take this document that you gave us and maybe attach a column to it, show us which ones have been completed, which ones are currently working, and what's the estimated time of completion. For example, the study for the industrial lands, et cetera. Because when we go through what Maya just told us about and we start rank ordering or prioritizing items, this is something else we've got to take into consideration. So I just ask that you take those two things and you put an extra column beside there and tell us what's been completed, what hasn't, and when we might be looking at getting to it. I don't think that'd be too difficult to do, but I know it would be helpful to me when we're looking at this.
I think a lot of this there's some pretty strong connections too, because like,
Right.
you know, the industrial lands report and then Beaver Creek and Bar Holdings, all that's going to be done at the same time. Or real close to the same time. All right.
And Barry, I would just say,
Yeah.
I have never seen the county commissioners put out a realistic docket.
Okay.
They put out
Aspirational.
their 20 or 30 things that they want done.
Yeah.
And that's why they have to prioritize.
Yeah.
Because I think they know from the start, you know, these are all the things on our docket.
Yeah.
We aren't gonna get to some of it.
Yeah, see, I'm new and I was looking at this as something that we're gonna do this year.
Well, I mean, I'm not expecting that we're going to get all 30 items done, but I want to get a lot more than 3 done. Go ahead, Helen.
Well, in terms of the proposed new stuff,
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't assume that that all of these are gonna end up on the docket. And then for me, you know, when I was looking at the docketing, I mean, one of the things that concerned me, I guess, was the allocation of staff to those docket items. And to my mind, what I would have liked to see is a lot of these docket items not happen, and that those staff be put into the comp plan, you know, those FTEs be put into the comp plan, because that's, I mean, this housing element alone is just gonna be, I mean, to do it right, it's gonna be a fair amount of work.
Go ahead.
So those are all, Commissioner Wheatley, those are all great comments, and staff would appreciate them coming from Planning Commission. And for the board to understand where Planning Commission would like to see the staff and the staff focus on where the staff to focus. The other thing is, when it comes to who's going to be actually completing some of these particular items, like the housing chapter update, which we know we have to do, and we know it's big. One of the things, we'll give you a preview, is that we'll be asking the Board of County Commissioners for funding. So we do have, or will have, I should say, funding from Commerce. They have, we will have the ability to submit our application for $700,000 to pay for a lot of this work. Some of that's going to have to go to an environmental impact statement for the comprehensive plan. It's going to be a larger chunk than we had initially anticipated. But one of the other items that we're looking to hire a consultant to assist staff on is that housing element and participation plan. So those are probably the two biggest areas where we'll be asking the board to place that funding. Now, all of these elements that Maya went through, we have done a basic budget for outside of what we already have staffing. And that actually, to do all of them does cost more than the $700,000 grant that Commerce has, but that will be part of the conversation that we have with the Board of County Commissioners, because we would have to then present a budget to them for approval if they wanted us to move forward with that. But what I didn't necessarily want to do is attach numbers to each of these elements for the Planning Commission, because I don't want you to look at these from a, well, from a numbers standpoint. We wanted to make sure that you were looking at the items, the value of those particular pieces of the comprehensive plan, envisioning that comprehensive plan. And then we would bring those particular dollars forward to the Board of County Commissioners with the planning commissions, with the public's input about this is what really matters to us. This is what we really want to see. This is where we really want the effort to be placed.
Do you have maybe a thumbnail about if we wanted to do everything, how much more than the 700,000 would that cost?
Yes.
Is that a big number?
It's not, it's about $275,000 more.
A couple FTEs.
Couple FTEs.
All right. Jim, did you have something? Do you have?
Well, I mean, so could we do some kind of a recommendation about the docket then? Because the commissioners are going to be looking at that in March.
So March 1st, they're just going to get this update. We're not, it's informational, and we're not asking for the board to make any decisions. We want to get, we want you all as the Planning Commission to have time to review. There'll be a couple more pieces of information that come to you so that it makes a bit more sense, of which one will be the survey. And I'm sorry that that particular survey, we had asked for that to be posted online. Apparently that did not get there. But the survey report is, sounds like it's important so that you can understand what went into it and how we did that. As well as the basic work plan that we've put together and the commerce checklist. Because I heard that you wanted to see what we're already in compliance with versus what we need to take a look at.
Something everybody needs to understand is the 2023 budget is already set.
2023 is correct. That is
So
set.
this would be for the 24-25 biennial.
Absolutely.
Commerce put out a handbook for SMP development. I'm assuming that they have something very similar for comp plan element.
Similar to for the comp plan and that, and there are some more specific ones for some of the newer elements, including climate change, and then of course the to help the communities plan around housing.
So do you think it's a fully developed handbook at this time for what we're going to be using for our comp plan update?
It's in draft form at the moment and out for public comment.
What is?
So the Commerce's guidance on the housing elements. Yeah.
Because I think there would be a lot of interest from the planning commissioners to peel through that a little bit.
Can I just say, I mean,
We
one
would
of the
get you a hard
commerce.
copy. We want
No,
to get
no,
you a hard
listen,
copy.
I represent the TRPC on the Puget Sound Regional Council Growth Management Advisory Board. And so I hear every month I'm hearing about all the stuff that's being developed for the comp plan. I encourage everyone to go to the Department of Commerce website and the Puget Sound Regional Council's website. There is so much excellent material, toolkits, guidelines, workshops. It's amazing how much stuff there is. Wouldn't you say?
There is a lot of information on
Yeah.
Commerce's website. I would caution when looking at PRSC because they do plan differently.
Yes, they do.
In those particular counties than we do down here.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that we can't learn from where they're currently at and where they're going.
Yeah, their methodologies are really interesting to look at. And they're, it is different because it's done through PSRC, so it's different that way.
Right.
But the materials and the guidelines are very relevant to Thurston County. So I really, for anybody that wants to really understand. And they also have just slideshows on what is the comprehensive plan review and all of that. So, please look at that stuff for whatever it is you're interested in, because they've got so much.
Go ahead, Jim.
So I'm good, I guess I'm getting kind of curious here now. It's been my experience that these kind of things take forever to get done. So with all the prioritizing, getting together with the board, when do we expect to get our hands in the dirt, actually doing something?
So that's why the timeline went away. But that's why we put the timeline up there. We expect.
I don't think I included that one this time, Chris, but probably mid-2024 is when comp plan will be coming back to the planning commission.
Okay.
That's not to say that we aren't going to be tapping the planning commission or to create subcommittees on some of these items and to be part of some of our public participation in our stakeholder groups. So there's a bit of work that we need to do on the front end to get some of this put together in a meaningful manner so that we can have conversations with the public so that we can then start to shape what that looks like before we bring that to the planning commission as a whole.
Okay, so you say mid-2024.
Correct.
So what is your expectation of being done by mid-2025?
We expect that we will be meeting the law.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Wheelie.
Yeah, well, can we get some clarification about, Maya, about how you're thinking about prioritization? Because your survey was asking for prioritization. You're saying that you're going to ask the commission for prioritization. And then, there's the prioritization based on what has to be done because the law says it has to be done and that there's a lot of work there.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I don't really understand. To return to this, what does prioritization do? Like, why did you ask that as why did you design the survey that way? And what answers is, how is prioritization helping you to develop this work?
So the prioritization is not for me, it's for the board. And in terms of the survey, we asked for prioritization so we could just get the top couple issues that rose the most from the community. And by and large, they were kind of all the same of the list we had. That's not to say that we didn't get other free responses of things that we hadn't identified. In terms of the Planning Commission prioritizing optional updates, I heard what Commissioner Day that you said that maybe prioritization is not the right vehicle for the Planning Commission to do that. And maybe we just consider looking at which of these do we think are important and which of these could could we drop off the list? That might be an alternative way to look at this. You know, prioritization is how we do docketing with the board, and it works really well. But I'm hearing that maybe we need to think about a different approach. I'm just hoping to have some information to bring to the board of what the Planning Commission considers to be the highest add value optional updates to the comp plan, and are there any that can, you know, possibly fall off or wait until the next periodic update?
Commissioner Day.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that is a really reasonable way to operate with the board. It's essentially you're setting up a fallback position if you don't get all the money. But I think my interest this whole time in this entire discussion about the comp plan and scope is so that we can send a really strong message to the board about what resources should go there. So it may have felt like, you know, I'm in an oppositional position, but what I really want to be able to do is send a really strong message to the board about how we resource this comp plan update, as opposed to starting with this like, well, here's a list of stuff and here's the most important stuff at the top. And then there's some stuff that people thought was kind of like, at the bottom. My goal is to be able to send a really strong message about what the resources need to be. Because what I really don't want to have happen is we're all of a sudden in the middle of 2024 and there's something that the Planning Commission really wants to dive into. And the answer has to be, we're not resourced for that. And that's the dilemma that we might set up if we don't have this opportunity to essentially advocate for resources on your behalf.
I wouldn't even disagree with that in any way. In fact, I would go as far as to say, I want to ask for it all.
Exactly. I would.
Okay, okay.
And probably some more.
And probably a little
budgeting.
extra too, just in case something comes up out of the community. But I mean, $275,000 sounds like a lot of money in my front pocket, but not in a, you know, $100 million a year budget. It doesn't sound like a whole lot of money. And I think it's important work. So if we could figure out a way to do that and either in staff or in-house staff or farm it out, that part I'm not sure matters to me, but I think it's important work that we should try to get done. Go ahead,
So
Doug.
do we formulate a recommendation? Because you're.
Well, we
briefing on
don't
the-
have enough numbers yet for them to do anything, but we can ask Chris to start thinking along those lines to put something together so we can advocate for staff to get more resources.
So what we've envisioned here is that we briefed the planning commission and provided the overview and information. We're going to do that very similar thing with the Board of County Commissioners on March 1st and then let them know we will be setting up a follow-up briefing with them for further discussion, but we needed to come back to you all first on March 15th, where we'll have this discussion about what is it that you want to see in our comprehensive plan update above and beyond what we have to do for the mandatory pieces. I do want to make sure that you all have some additional information before making that recommendation, whatever that recommendation is. So I would ask that we not make that recommendation today, but to come back on the 15th and have that fuller discussion.
And I also think it's important to remind ourselves that a lot of this work that needs to be done before we do comp plan stuff is still on the docket. And I really don't want 2023 to go to waste and not get this stuff done. So if we can really beat up this docket and get that done, 2024 will be a lot easier. Anybody else have anything else on this particular subject? Does staff need anything from the Planning Commission today then?
I think I have everything I need.
Commissioner Pessinger, we didn't hear much from you. Are you still there?
Yep.
All right, well, thank you very much, Maya, and we hope to see you again soon then. And we will be moving on to our next item, item number 8, which is our subcommittee report. And I'm not exactly sure how we want to address all of these, but I hope everybody had a chance to go through and read them. I think that maybe some of these have actually been answered a little bit, but maybe not enough. And maybe the best way to go do this is just to kind of go through them one at a time. Unless anybody has any additions or anything else they'd like to add to this before we start? All right, well, let's just kind of go through these then. The first one's about subcommittees and utilizing subcommittees. And there was already a plan to start subcommittees for comp plan stuff. So I don't know if we need to have any subcommittees before that for any items. I don't, the last time we used a subcommittee was for wireless and that was marginally effective. But I think that subcommittees for comp plan are going to be a very important thing. We're probably going to need maybe more than one, probably one for each element, maybe potentially. And when these elements, when this plan starts to get formulated a little bit more, expect that we will be developing subcommittees, and hopefully we have a lot of volunteers for a lot of these subcommittees, because there's going to be some pretty deep dives on a lot of it. And it'd be great if we weren't here till midnight every night.
Should that be referred to the subcommittee of putting together
A subcommittee for development.
It's escaping me right now. We're putting together our procedures and.
Yeah.
Oh, rules and procedures?
Yeah.
I don't know if we need to do any of that yet, because we're still going to be waiting for the county to come back on our countywide policies for rules and procedures. And then at that point, we will decide on where we want to go forward with it. But I think we need that information before we.
But this could be referred to that group when we form our committees.
We probably could, yeah.
So it goes into our rules and procedures, so there is an official.
Our rules and procedures already establish a way to do subcommittees.
Okay, then forget.
Okay, well, on the next one,
Well, can I ask a sort of clarification of that? So are you, I mean, we have this. So were you sort of saying we should have a subcommittee so that this and our discussion has somewhere to go, like to sort of be parked for future work? Like, if we're gonna talk about this
I think he
tonight,
wants to have a formal process for appointing subcommittees for comp plan work.
oh, I see, okay.
Yeah.
And I'll just say, I mean, I'm not really opposed to subcommittees, but when I first started on the planning commission, subcommittees were used by a few people to go do stuff on their own, and they were not. And so I think for our subcommittees, they need to be public meetings. And so that the public is aware and knows when and where they probably don't have to be like this, like videotape, but they need to be open to people. Because I can tell you, when I first started coming to these, it wasn't easy to find out when the subcommittees were meeting or what they were talking about.
So I can address that. If that's what was occurring, that is not how we operate today. Advisory groups and even subcommittees of those advisory groups are open. But we may not be broadcasting it either via YouTube or a webinar, but they will be held in locations where the public can attend. We will be announcing when they're attending or when we're holding those events, so that we're being transparent about all of the work that we're doing.
Will subcommittees have public comment portions to
We
them?
will not have public comment, but the public will be able to come
Okay.
in and hear what's going on, and then make the public comment either at the planning commission or the board of county commissioners.
The second item was about showing up, not liking what staff has proposed, but not having an alternative. I think I understand that complaint well, and I think we probably all do. So if you guys see something that you don't like beforehand, it would be really helpful if you had alternative language or alternative ideas. Obviously, sometimes things don't come to you until the last minute, but the more homework you do, the less times that will probably happen. Go
And
ahead.
I'll take it one step further. There have been times when there have been nay votes, and I did not have a clue as to why they were voting nay. And if I don't have a clue, maybe the nay is a very valid point.
Mhm.
But if I don't have a clue as to why they're saying no, I lose respect for that no.
Okay.
On that, though, I mean, that's the route to doing a minority report. So eventually that question is answered in a
But not to
way.
this group.
Ah,
It needs to be answered to this group. If you think we're off base, you should tell us we're off base. And you're free to vote no, and you're free to do a minority report. But we should know why, because you might have a very valid point. And if I don't know why, I can't side with you.
So you'd like to see more opposition during the debate before we take a vote?
More debate during.
Yeah. Yep, that's fair. The next item was about having your cameras turned on. Seemed a little specific, but
I have a comment about that.
please do.
So there's been a number of longstanding repetitive comments about people, planning commissioners need to attend the meetings in person, and planning commissioners need to be open and transparent, and planning commissioners need to not hide in anonymity, and planning commissioners need to be in the meeting. If they're going to be in the meeting electronically, then they need to have their cameras turned on. And I just think that we're going to have, we've already discovered and heard debate within our own commission that requiring, for example, every person to physically attend a meeting may well be a barrier to people in different circumstances from being able to participate. And, you know, I'm the one, obviously, that is most oftentimes attending the meetings remotely without a camera on. And I don't think in any way, shape, or form it has created any negative problem. I know that others disagree with that, but I don't think it has lessened the debate. I don't think it has lessened the participation. I mean, I show up to meetings, I have researched the topics, I participate in the discussion. Nobody would accuse me of being a shrinking violet and not speaking up. And I really hope that this language would never be used in the future against anybody else who might need to participate remotely or might not want to have their camera on. I don't think those are requirements. There's a huge amount. There's no anonymity here. All of us are named people. We use our full legal names on every single thing. We vote by name. They're not necessarily recorded in the meeting minutes, but they're certainly, as you've all pointed out, the meeting record is actually the video and audio record of the meeting. So we're voting by name. Our name is on every vote we make. Our name is on every comment we make. Our name is on every attendance list or not attendance list. I don't understand positioning this as a lack of transparency or an anonymity thing. There's no anonymity at all. And I'm not looking for anonymity. I don't think many other people are as well. And if we're going to be fair and allow for equal participation from a broad range of our community, I think we ought to maybe back down on this a little bit.
Commissioner Wheatley.
yeah, well, I agree with what Commissioner Pester said, and you know, there's certainly, I mean, I can sort of think of gender dimensions to this, perhaps. I mean, their parents. I know Joel's sort of been in that position sometimes. And in terms of being seen, you know, this is something that comes up, you know, of course, if you're going to choose to be on a commission, you're putting yourself out in public in many ways, but it is maybe more subject to negotiate. There might be reasons, I guess. So I agree with that. But also I just, you know, want to read, what the policy is for county commissioners. It doesn't call out the planning commission, but the policy for county commissioners is any member of the board of county commissioners may attend any board meeting by telephone or video conferencing. Provided, however, equipment must be available at the location of the meeting, which will allow all present at the meeting, including the public, to hear the member's voice, and for the member participating to hear all that is stated at the meeting. So that's actually in the code. So you know, assuming that if it's good enough for county commissioners, it's good enough for the planning commission. I think that kind of settles it.
I would concur.
Does anybody else have any comments on this particular one?
I just don't think it's open public meeting if you're not vision, not seeing it, even though the commissioners can do that, we can too. And, but every single meeting, the public doesn't know that that's the person that's speaking.
What if a
They can't see
member of the
it.
public was here and they were blind? Right? They wouldn't see any of us.
They wouldn't see any.
It doesn't matter. It's still a public meeting, it's still open.
Well, I disagree, so.
All right, well, I don't think that's gonna change anything on anything, but we do need to air all these out. An ongoing complaint that we've heard for a couple of years is the formatting of the reports that come from staff. So if you email us something and it is formatted as an 8.5 by 14, and then we want to print it at home, most of us aren't set up for 8.5 by 14, we're set up for 8.5 by 11. I personally don't print a whole lot from home, so this isn't an issue for me, but I have heard this issue, I think 3 or 4 years running. I don't know what the solution is. And maybe it's because I don't know how to do Word.
So. Hard now that we're staffed up to template the items that you see so that you're not, so that this particular issue is a non-issue. There may very well be some items that have to be created so that they are tiny and you can actually read them. But they should be further further and farther between than your normal everyday documents. So this has been heard and we are working on the backside to rectify this particular issue and make sure that we're consistent in the information that we're providing you.
The next item on here is about the planning commissioner list by district, and I think that is up to date and published on the website.
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
I think I just looked at it last week, so I think that is up there. If you look, it actually has a link. When you go to the planning commission, there's a link to the roster as a PDF. The next item here is about the BOCC and the planning commission working together to develop our goals. And I think that this might have been more generalized than just our comp plan, but it is kind of it with a focus towards the comp plan. Is I'm kind of reading between the lines there. And I don't know if we're working that direction well enough to address this particular comment, but I hope we are. I don't know if we need to go into it anymore right now, or did our earlier discussions kind of at least get the topic rolling enough?
Well, I'm the one that put that in there, obviously. And I would say, I mean, because I've heard Commissioner Passenger, I don't know if it made it in here, but you know, he's also talked about sort of the order of things. I do think we're moving that way, but I think it would be helpful to really spend some time thinking about and talking with the Board of Commissioners about how long-range planning is sort of a different process, right? Like that I feel like there's a lot of ambiguity, or, you know, I don't understand the procedures compared to other jurisdictions I've looked at, maybe when we're doing long-range planning in particular. You know, I sort of feel like that's just not fleshed out. There's maybe not a clear understanding between the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners about how that should go forward. You know, what the, you know, if there's sort of more, we could have sort of a more clear sense of the standard procedures for doing that. So, I mean, I feel like that needs to be worked on.
I wouldn't disagree with you. I guess where this falls back to is we don't get to dictate anything to the Board of County Commissioners. And as a board in general, they're scheduled through the county manager. So the county manager is really the person, you know, even CPED staff or even the director of CPED is not going to say you need to listen to the Planning Commission. It's going to go through the county manager. The county manager is going to decide its value and then bring it before the board, whether or not that's something that needs to be done. I don't know. I think that we could request for more joint meetings with the BOCC. But outside of that, I don't know how we would convey face-to-face with them. Other than as a private citizen, you're always welcome to private appointments with each of the commissioners or show up at a meeting to offer public testimony. Go ahead.
Oh, I think the one you identified there is probably what I think we should be looking to do is have more dialogue with the board.
Ask for formal meetings.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not opposed to doing something like that. And maybe we need to work on some sort of recommendation or request. But that kind of goes into your next item on here. I'm sorry, I should
Yeah,
assume the
it
next
is. Yeah.
item.
Can you kind of tell, because there's a.
They're
lot
numbered.
to this.
And so maybe we can kind of noodle on that some, or maybe if you want
Yeah.
to work on that some and then bring it back and we can kind of talk about it some more and then make the ask.
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, maybe I should work on it with you or something.
That'd be fine. Send me an email,
Yeah,
please.
yeah.
Yeah. The next one is about rules and procedures. I think we kind of touched on that one already, so I don't know if we need to say much more. Having staff follow a consistent process for each major update. I think you guys really do have a template for that now, and maybe in our March 1st meeting, when we're kind of doing our short course, that could be part of how you guys set your workflows for everything and telling us how that goes. Is that part of that, or am I thinking wrong?
So probably not part of that particular conversation. That's going to be a commerce-driven discussion on
Okay.
planning items, of course. But what you should be noticing is the information, the memos are being set up and they're consistent. You're getting the same information in the same manner for each of the different items that come before you. Now, not all of the information is going to be exactly the same just because of the nature of the different projects. Development code's a little bit different than comprehensive plan, but your comprehensive plan items should look very similar, and that memo should look absolutely the same. You're going to have the same pieces and parts. So on the back end, staff is working to do a lot of these procedural updates and yeah.
This next item is the planning commissioners getting copies of the checklist from the appropriate state agencies. And this might, again, I'm assuming here, focus back down to like a comp plan handbook from Commerce. And when those come out, getting them disseminated to the planning commission would probably be a helpful thing. I know that my SMP handbook was very helpful to me during the development of SMP. So if a comp plan handbook comes out, if we could get some of those, that would be awesome.
We'll make sure that we get those.
I have a comment.
Please do.
So this one and the prior one, I think, were mine. And they were actually one item that had like 6 bullet points to it. It was sort of a requested process and then A, B, C, D, E, F, G sort of thing. So it might follow better if you look at it that way.
Okay. Okay. The bottom of this page about asking for data and looking at our own scope of work and to have more public outreach. I think those are things that we've all kind of touched on, but if anybody else wants to say anything in addition to those. And it kind of, well, I guess those all kind of run into the next one too. Review and evaluate the relevant information, and then we can discuss and debate the merits and concerns about each update. The one here about providing appropriate language for motions to the planning commission to consider making relative to the update. Was that a request to have staff help us make motions or to have us make our own alternative motions, or does anybody have any?
That was also mine, and that was just the last bullet on my list. It was just simply, I know that one is something that's already in place. I was putting it in context relative to the other things that may be newer.
Okay, sorry about that. I wasn't following that thread as well as I should have. And then the docketing part we kind of addressed. And then the part on equity and how it applies to planning. Some of that's gonna come up in Commerce short course stuff, isn't it?
It should, yes.
Yeah. So maybe what we can do on that is wait to go through that stuff, and then if we have any further questions, we can ask them at that time or ask for other resources. This next item here.
I didn't write that one.
Well,
I didn't change anything.
Well,
I don't know if you should respond.
I don't know if you need to respond. You're certainly welcome to respond. I know that I've read that a few times and I thought how to respond to that about a dozen different ways. And I'm not sure what to do other than apologize to you if you felt that way coming from me. It certainly wasn't my intention, but I'm a dumb guy sometimes, so.
Well, I don't like being the only female on a 9-member commission. I mean, I'm awfully used to it. But it does point to, I'm gonna take this in the spirit of that it is really important for us to always be asking ourselves if we're being careful to represent a broad spectrum in the county, right? Because, for example, if we all held up our hands, how many of us are property owners?
Yeah.
And yet, in the county part of the county, it's something like 40% are renters, There are a lot of kind of demographic, besides gender, which, women are a majority in the county, I believe, but not on the commission. And that does point to, ways that we should probably think of, when we start thinking about rules and procedures, maybe that's something that we should incorporate into our thinking about rules and procedures and how we work to make sure that we're trying to represent a broad spectrum of the county as we do our planning work. I think that's a very valid concern. In terms of the dynamics of the commission, I would say, and maybe, my profession, I was in a minority as a female to begin with, so I guess it's something that is familiar to me. But if somebody were to come onto the board, if I were not used to that kind of work environment and I came on, I said, yeah, I'll join the planning commission. And then I came and there were like 8 men and me. Then of course, that can have an impact for sure. And that's something to think about, especially, if we should be so lucky as to get younger, like really young members of the planning commission or something like that, that's something to think about. Just the impact of the demographics on whether people feel like they can express themselves. I feel that that you've always been really careful to make sure that I feel comfortable speaking. So I appreciate that. And I do want to say that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to make sure that if we have any kind of disagreements, they're policy based and not identities based disagreements, and being careful of that is something that we all should do. Yeah. But if there's something that you specifically need or want to see, please speak up and let us know.
Yeah.
Did anybody else have anything on this particular item?
I think we'd all like to see more diversity, but the problem is
That kind of gets to our last one.
yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
I thought that's where we're going.
I wanted to make sure that the second to last one was
Yeah.
was taken care of.
Okay, yeah,
I don't know about her being smarter than the rest of us put together.
Well,
Yeah, I almost did wear my Mensa sweatshirt today.
I didn't write that. I appreciate the thought, but
yeah. Okay, well then on our last one, about the identity makeup of the planning commission not reflecting very closely, probably at all, the identity makeup of our county. I'm not really sure where to go with that, since none of us make the decision who's here, other than we could decline, as this commenter says, we could decline an appointment. And we
There's a problem with that.
yeah,
And I've asked this question of the commissioners. Almost every board and commission they have are short people.
mhm,
They just don't have enough applicants. And if you talk to Jamie Caldwell, who is the clerk of the board, who takes in the applications, she has to go out and beat the bushes to get applicants for boards and commissions. So, I mean, it's not a matter of not wanting the diversity, it's more a matter of not having the people apply. And I have gone out in my community. There you go.
Yeah.
I have gone out in my community and I beat the bushes with all 590 of my contacts for all different types of boards and commissions around this county in particular. The Noxious Weed Board and all of these different things. And I've tried to get people to submit applications. People that I know are qualified, that are female, that are Black, that are Hispanic, you name it. But they just don't have the time, or they don't want the commitment. And that's what I've been seeing. And I mean, the reason I'm on this board is because I was recruited. I was specifically recruited by a commissioner. So, and he had a hell of a time finding a spot, not a spot for me, but to find people to apply for the position.
I think that's probably not the norm, though. I think of all the boards and commissions and LMDs, we see it all the
Yeah,
time.
all the time.
Finding volunteers is tough. Planning commission is the hardest one to get on, though. There is the most competition for it. But again, we don't have any control over who gets nominated or who gets appointed. We do some recruiting. It's been sad the few times that people that would fit some of these demographics have not been able to make it on for whatever ridiculous reason it is, one way or the other. But so I don't know how we can really address this, but I also think it would be a mistake not to say that more than just these specific identities not being represented, I'd really like to see more ideas that are not being represented. I mean, most people that are here, like you were saying, we're all at least in the upper half and probably in the top quintile in the income distribution, maybe even higher than that. So having some people on here that have a different lived experience is probably something that would be pretty useful. I know that there's probably a good argument that could be made for having people that have very specific interests. Like I think having a guy that farms on the planning commission is a really good idea.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and if we had more stuff like that, I think that'd be great. Like if we had a traffic engineer that was on the planning commission, that would be pretty great. If we had somebody that, well, we kind of have a realtor, but you don't really, you're not ideological about it, but it's good to have somebody here that thinks about what housing in the county is like. It doesn't hurt my feelings at all that we got a policy guy here.
Yeah, college.
I think that's pretty darn helpful, but there are a lot of other special interests that I think that if they were here, it'd be great. But I don't know how to do that.
I think that's kind of what we can do. I think it's also something we could express. I'm sure the commissioners would be amenable to that interest of ours to have I'm sure they have a similar one.
Yeah.
But I think it really does come down to like, maybe it's a little bit on us to keep beating the bushes and hope it
Yeah.
works.
And at our last dinner that we had with them, I think one of the things that I brought up to them was that this is the only board and commission that the applications don't come to and then go back to the BOCC with a recommendation. When I was on the Surface and Stormwater Advisory Board, when there was a vacancy, the clerk of the board, La Benita at the time, she would get all the applications, send them to the Surface Stormwater Advisory Board. And we'd go through all of them and say, this would be a good fit for us because we have this hole. And then send it back to the BOCC, and then the BOCC, they didn't have to take our recommendation, just like they don't have to take any other recommendation, but they could at least be a little bit more informed on where we see our own shortcomings. But go ahead, Joel.
It brings up a thought for me in that as we go to 5 commissioners and currently there's 3 planning commissioners per commissioner, it might be a time for a conversation about the number of people on the planning commission and if it's going to change and if that would create vacancies that could do something about some of this. And I know getting any larger can get really unwieldy.
It's impossible.
Well,
State law limits it to 9 members.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, and I guess just for full disclosure, some of those conversations have been happening.
Okay.
And the best way forward is not with dismantling a planning commission, because that has its own, you can't take away somebody's appointments. But as appointments come up, the BOCC can be mindful of how that's done, and they'll have to set new policies as a 5 commission board on how they move forward with that, because 5 and a 9 is weird.
Yeah.
You know, 3 and a 9 is easy, 5 and a 9 is weird.
Yep.
So
So,
they used to have it 2 per commissioner and 3 adjunct.
Okay, a larger, yeah, okay, got it.
yeah, that will have to be a discussion that they have, and maybe we make them a recommendation, but again, they make all those decisions on it, and I think that they are aware that that's coming. Well, 3 out of 5 of them are aware, so we don't know who the other 2 are yet.
Yeah.
so.
I thought you were saying it's impossible when you get a commission too big, it's just impossible to manage. And I'm gonna say, we're gonna find out. Because at the Port of Olympia, they just made the size of the advisory committee 17.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's hurting cats. That's,
it's gonna be really interesting. We've had 1 meeting so far.
yeah, good luck with
Show
it.
up.
Well, I don't know if we need any more discussion on any of these. But it's.
I have a question.
Please do.
It seemed like we skipped over the third of the last one, about equity.
Talked about the commerce short course.
Yeah, we're gonna kind of talk about that. There's a portion of that in the commerce short course. I believe.
Oh,
I would suggest
Cool.
that's probably a good place to start. May not be the end.
Yeah,
but a good place to start.
Yeah.
yeah. I don't think anybody's opposed to any of that. Because
Sounds good. I just missed that.
Commissioner Wheatley's comments on that earlier tonight kind of drove that point home.
I did have one more,
Yeah.
sort of on the, what it's, and maybe Commissioner Pessinger can elaborate on the mansplaining part of this, but no, I mean, because I think, if he saw something, I believe it. I would say, part of the difficulty with bringing people on, there's kind of a saying, like, for getting women to run for office, that you have to ask a woman 7 times, like where you have to ask a man once, you have to ask a woman 7 times to run before they even think about it. And I think that there's a lot of work to do on the county. And this, again, the comp plan might be a good place, and bringing in somebody who's an expert on equity outreach might be really, really helpful to us too. That the way the struggle to build relationships with underrepresented communities, it takes a lot of persistence. Because they're not going to believe you. They're going to say you're just trying to check off a box, and why should I put myself out for that? And so in connection to that, I just had a reflection that I do feel like, and this isn't just the Planning Commission, it's just something about professional life. If you're doing something that isn't the norm for your gender or your demographic group, whatever it is, there is a feeling that you have to work, you know, twice as hard to get half as much done, kind of, to be heard, or, and I do feel like I definitely overcompensate in the amount of work that I do. Which can get a little exhausting, but I have to say, I feel like I have to do it. And maybe that's something that we could work on together.
Do you feel
in
like
some
that's
way.
be a gender-based thing or be an idea side of it? That you're,
I think it's, yeah, it's
is it an uphill?
parse out, right? Because I mean, you know, how do you end up on a board in the first place? And,
Yeah.
you know, who asks you, and how do you become aware of it? And then how do you learn how the work is done? I mean, there's so many things about this. But I do feel like, when I came on, it was as a kind of a representing a minority viewpoint in terms of the norms of the board, and therefore I have to work really, really hard to make sure that everything is documented. And, you know, I have 5 million different sources, you know, to point to say that my point of view is legitimate. And that, you know, that gets a little exhausting, I guess.
I can
Yeah,
tell you,
that's
it's
just-
not just you,
Yeah,
okay? I mean, I've been
Yeah.
fighting the battle for 10 years in a certain category, and I have all the facts and figures and details and everything else to go behind it. And I'm still fighting uphill battles.
yeah.
Do you track your wins and losses in votes here?
Yeah, I know. It's,
Well-
it's been no, but it's
I-
been a productive year, I must say.
I think everybody should probably, just for their own edification, track their wins and losses on votes
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm a lot less successful than I thought I was.
And I just want to say to what was said about, you know, not trusting people. I've run into that especially from ag people, from whatever background they are, you know. It's the idea that, you know, oh, you want an ag person on this group because you want a token ag person, which I can attest it happens because the day after I was appointed to the planning commission, my very first public hearing, it was made specifically clear that farmers were a part of the planning commission. And I'm like, this is my first day. And we're like, oh, I haven't had any input yet. But, you know, other people, I'll use my dad and my uncle as examples because I believe my dad was on the very first ag committee in Thurston County. It is hard to get people to sign up for that because they have seen how they do all this work. And then by the time it gets to the board goes and does whatever they want anyways.
I should also say though that, you know, it's hard to find volunteers. We've had more meetings in this room now than we've had people show up to watch. And we've had nobody offer public testimony in person. So,
Since we've been-
not since we've been here. Since this has not been as painful as I thought it might be. Does anybody have anything else while this Band-Aid is off? And
I think that, you know, I'm making a running list of things that I think we might need subcommittees for. I think there's still work to be done, conversations to be had, and I think maybe even some recommendations that we could come up with that would help with recruitment and people feeling like there's some efficacy when they show up. It's just, I would put it on the list of subcommittees.
all right. Does anybody? Kevin, do you have anything else?
I have lots of other ideas and thoughts, but I think this has been well discussed so far.
Okay. All right, well, then we're going to move on to the next item on our meeting, which is a staff update.
So, two things. One, I believe you all have received an email from Polly. January 24th, the Board of County Commissioners did adopt the advisory and commission's handbook. So
I have not seen that yet.
check into that.
I think it came through.
I'm sorry?
I have a vague recollection. We're just trying to figure out if it came through for us.
Okay. Me too. That's why I said I think. But it has been adopted by the Board of County Commissioners and it is on their website. If a email wasn't sent out, we will make sure that it was sent out with that link so that you can see it. It's a hot 8 pages. And then one item to note, February 27th, the county will be migrating its website to a new platform. This means that our website will be down. We are anticipating that it will go back live with the new brand spanking new platform on March 1st. There's been a lot of hard work that's gone into this to make this as smooth as possible transition, but please give us grace. As we make this transition, there will likely be things that were on the website that you don't see, or there will be broken links. So there is a whole, we've put together a form that you can submit to either the county PIO or directly to the department's PIO so that you can make us informed of anything that you don't see, that you can't find, or that a link is broken, because this will take us some time, especially with the links, to make sure that all of those links are up and ready. IT continues to say that they've done, they don't think any link is going to be, you know, that broken. But I've done website migrations before. It just happens. So I just wanted to make everybody aware in the public who still may be with us at 9 o'clock here, that is occurring, and to let us know if you can't get at or access things, but it will look very different. So yeah, that's where I'm going to leave that.
All right. Got it?
Can I ask something about that? Like,
Sure.
So if people want to find planning commission meetings, is that going to be brought more forward? Because you really have to hunt and peck right now.
We think that's great. That has been brought forward. It will be, we'll find out as the new platform. So a lot of work went into building this county website from the user experience and not from the department experience. So for context, CPED had 7 or 8 individual websites that were on different platforms, and all kinds of people had access to editing. All of that was brought together and everybody is now on the same platform. So when you think about, am I doing business with Thurston County, or I want to look up an event for Thurston County, or I know the department that I want to, but I don't exactly know what information I'm going to find there. It's built from that user perspective. And so.
Any other questions for Chris? All right, we're going to look at our calendars. March 1st, we're not going to have a regular meeting, but we are going to have our short course on planning. I hope everybody can make it. Is anybody thinking that they might not be able to? Great. And then on the 15th, we're going to do our public hearing for the updated forest conversion ordinance, title 17.25.
There's an outside chance I'll be out of town.
Okay, you're
Unlikely, but
Okay.
possible.
okay.
We also have we have 2 public hearings.
Open space and
Open space.
Oh yeah, we're doing open space too.
2 public hearings that you set today will be.
So we have 3 public hearings.
It will not be a public hearing for that's a work session.
I just read this whole thing wrong. I'm sorry. You were right. We have our public
No,
hearings we
it's
set
comma.
for today. And then we're going to be working on A25. Or, yes, okay, sorry about that. And Joel may or may not be here.
May or may not, likely will, but it's possible I'll be out of town.
Does anybody have anything for the good of the order?
Aside, I think what you mentioned too about no public responses to people being here and all that. I don't know how we correct that, but I think that is something that possibly needs to be added to our list is how do we get people in the room?
Yeah,
Or, yeah, I mean, can they not find our new building or what? I don't know, but.
I think it's hard to find the meetings on the website. I mean, the website fix might help a bit with that. Because it's really hard to find your way to the planning commission right now and then to find out what's on the agenda.
well, I'm sure that as comp plan starts rolling in, we will
Yeah.
start, the seats will fill up.
Right.
But I know that even I watch all of our meetings usually once, if not twice, on YouTube. And sometimes I'm like watcher number 8 and then I'm watcher number 12. And I'm sure that the other 7 and 11 people are probably staff members or somebody else at the county. So it would be, I would love to see more public engagement, but that's not something I can control.
And you know, on that, I mean, I think I mentioned this before, I think the port has this thing where, and it may be the way it's recorded or something, but if you hit a spot on the agenda, it takes you to that spot on the YouTube
That
video
sounds
or
fancy.
something.
That sounds fancy.
It's very.
Yeah, BFCC doesn't even do that.
Well, doesn't the port, is
I
it?
think you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you just, yeah, you look at the agenda and you say, I wanna, yeah, just look at that and whatever it is, whatever the recording system is and however it gets posted, you just go straight to that spot.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
So the county
It
is-
happens that way on TVW for legislative hearings as well.
Above my pay grade.
Well, maybe tell the PIO to start poaching somebody from the port or TVW. to get it done.
Maybe the port could do a short course on indexing.
Does anybody have anything else for the good of the order? Okay, we're only running a little over an hour late, so with having no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
Good.
Thanks, Eric.